habitats on Earth. The world's largest rainforest is watered by the world's mightiest river. It's home to the greatest diversity of living things anywhere. And dozens still discovered every year. Is changing fast, threatening the animals and plants that thrived here for millions of years. Their future hangs in the balance. Black caiman are among the Amazon's most ancient inhabitants. These living fossils have remained almost unchanged since the time of dinosaurs. But recently, a strange behavior has been observed among caiman. It happens during the dry season. Between June and October, when rain falls only a few days a month, giving the Amazon a chance to dry out. River levels drop, leaving shallow pools along the edges of waterways. The black caiman are quick to seize the opportunity. Birds take notice too. Black skimmers move inland from the coast, and egrets gather by the hundreds. They are all here for one thing. The fishing is excellent. The pools have stranded huge shoals of fish, and the Amazon's largest predator closes in. During the dry season, the caiman gather in large numbers. But what they do next is even more extraordinary. This strange behavior is still not fully understood. Caiman are known to jump and slap the water as part of a mating display. But here, it's transformed into a synchronized and deadly ballet. The caiman appear to be working in a pack to round up their prey. The panicked fish are caught by the hungry jaws. Those that escape are picked off by the egrets probing the shallows, and skimmers targeting the surface. The fish don't stand a chance. The Amazon basin dominates the northern half of South America, stretching over 400 million hectares. Weaving through this hothouse of weird and wonderful life is the Amazon River itself, flowing for more than 6,000 kilometers. The creatures of this realm are part of a complex web of mutual dependence. Their interlocking relationships have evolved over millennia. One of the strangest and most mysterious involves a very small frog and a very large spider. It is behavior rarely seen before. This dotted humming frog lives on the forest floor, a dangerous place, full of potential predators, including this burrowing tarantula spider. This nocturnal hunter, with a leg span of up to 16 centimeters, can easily catch mice and even small birds. It kills by injecting its prey with venom. The poison first stuns, and then, while the victim is still alive, dissolves it from the inside, so the spider can suck out the remains. Any creature would be keen to avoid such a fate. It seems the little dotted humming frog has made a fatal error in its choice of refuge. A tarantula's lair is a potential death trap, especially one filled with hungry babies. For the frog, the outcome cannot be good. Once it's within range, the spider will pounce and inject its deadly dose of venom. But not this time. Hairs on the spider's legs allow her to detect chemicals on the frog's skin. Perhaps she senses that the frog would make a dangerous meal. So why welcome it into her burrow? It sees this is a mutually beneficial arrangement. Frogs eat ants, which in turn prey on spider eggs and spiderlings. And for the frog, there's total protection. No other predator would dare take on this mother or her babies. Nearby, another remarkable story of cooperation and adaptation is unfolding. It involves a tree, a bee, and a razor-toothed rodent. A forest plant and two animals earn South American economies millions of dollars a year by doing what comes naturally. Brazil nuts really do come from Brazil, and most grow wild in the Amazon. But they depend on pollinators that have evolved with the necessary skills. The Brazil nut tree's pale, fleshy flowers have tightly wrapped petals. Prying them apart to reach the nectar inside takes a lot of muscle. Only the biggest and strongest bees can do it. For its efforts, the bee is rewarded with a sip of nectar. But as it struggles with the flower, it's also dusted with pollen. When the bee visits other Brazil nut flowers, the pollen shakes loose, the bee gets a meal, and the flowers are fertilized. The third party in this tale is a little mammal whose efforts ensure the Brazil nut tree lives on. An agouti is one of the few creatures in the rainforest with strong enough teeth to break the outer shell of a seed pod. Its reward is a hearty meal, packed with essential fat and calories. A single pod can contain up to 25 nuts, way too many for the agouti to eat in one meal. So he hides the leftovers. The agouti buries his treasure all over the forest. Some nuts will remain in the ground to germinate and grow into the next generation of Brazil nut trees. Ancient relationships like these are essential to the life of the Amazon. They have made the forest what it is today. But can they endure as the forest changes around them? Much of the Amazon basin lies in Brazil, where deforestation is a major problem. Trees are being burned to clear land for farming and cut down to meet the demand for lumber. Up to 80% of the logging is illegal. Now the forest may have a fighting chance with the help of an armed task force. The government has declared war on the illegal loggers. But protecting an area larger than India is almost impossible. Every day, the Amazon still loses 19 square kilometers of forest. And besides the trees, much more is lost. A complex living community filled with undiscovered secrets that could benefit all mankind. Among its other wonders, the Amazon is the world's medicine chest. Scientists already know that over a quarter of the active ingredients in cancer-fighting drugs come from the rainforests, even though they have only tested 1% of the plants. Some plants are packed with deadly compounds. They're the source for poisons like cyanide and addictive drugs like nicotine and cocaine. Countless other plants use poisons as chemical defenses. Unripe forest fruits are bitter, toxic, and normally indigestible. But macaws have little to eat during the dry season. They use their strong beaks and agile claws to extract whatever nourishment they can. And then have to deal with a belly full of toxic plant matter. Like other parrots, they have found a solution. At this time of year, parrots will travel more than 15 kilometers every 2 or 3 days to a particular bend in the river. They're heading for clay banks, exposed by the river as it dries and recedes. Somehow, the birds have learned over time that clay neutralizes the toxins in their diet, which makes it an essential ingredient for surviving the dry season. The cliffs also provide the perfect place to meet and greet others of their kind. Macaws are the largest and one of the most beautiful parrots in the world. In South America, there are 17 different species, all with stunning and brilliant plumage. Highly intelligent and extremely sociable, they travel together in large flocks as they search for food. Carry on a seemingly endless conversation of loud squawks. Socializing is more than a way to pass the time. It's a chance to find a mate. For macaws, this is an important choice. They mate for life. A faithful partnership that can last for 50 years. Macaws aren't the only creatures that must deal with plants that are poisonous, tasteless, or just difficult to eat. It's a common problem here, the plant's defense against voracious vegetarians. But few creatures are as ingenious as the Amazon's most numerous inhabitants. Ants. The leaf-cutter ants have been hard at work here for over 50 million years. An ant carefully measures out a portion of leaf, using her leg span as a guide. Then she removes the piece using jaws that vibrate 1,000 times a second. Leaf-cutter ants have an elaborate caste system defined by the size of the ant. The largest are the soldiers, who stand ready to defend the long lines of medium-sized foragers as they carry the leaf sections back to the nest. The foragers lift loads up to 20 times their own weight, the equivalent of a human carrying a small car. Smaller ants act as additional guardians for the workers, ever vigilant, even when they're hitching a ride. The leafcutter's underground nest can measure over 15 meters in diameter and be up to 5 meters deep. It's home to up to 8 million individuals. What happens inside is extraordinary. Within the nest, leaf portions are handed over to the smallest caste, the gardeners. They chew the leaves into a sticky mass and store it in special chambers. Another chamber houses the colony's most precious possession, an edible fungus. A gardener cuts off a piece of the fungus and carries it to the new stash. In no time, it will begin to grow on the leaves. It's this fungus, not the leaves, that feeds the ants. And they cultivate it as carefully as any human gardeners. It's an amazing adaptation, one that has taken millions of years to perfect. Unlike the leaf-cutter ants beneath their feet, the Martis people have never relied on gardening. Instead, they gather plants and hunt. One of nearly 200 native tribes still living in the Amazon, their first contact with the outside world was as recent as the 1970s. Since then, an estimated third of their population have been wiped out by Western diseases. And the survivors now live in the protection of a national park. Through countless generations, the Martis people have gained a deep knowledge of their jungle home.
You, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear.
That you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of your ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Vice President Johnson, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chief Justice, President Eisenhower, Vice President Nixon, President Truman, Reverend clergy, fellow citizens. We observe today not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom, symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, signifying renewal as well as change. For I have sworn before you and Almighty God the same solemn oath our forebears prescribed nearly a century and 3/4 ago. The world is very different now, for man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. And yet the same revolutionary beliefs for which our forebears fought are still at issue around the globe. The belief that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. We dare not forget today that we are the heirs of that first revolution. Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed and to which we are committed today at home and around the world. Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and the success of liberty. This much we pledge and more. To those old allies whose cultural and spiritual origins we share, we pledge the loyalty of faithful friends. United, there is little we cannot do in a host of cooperative ventures. Divided, there is little we can do, for we dare not meet a powerful challenge at odds and split asunder. To those new states whom we welcome to the ranks of the free, we pledge our word that one form of colonial control shall not have passed away merely to be replaced by a far more iron tyranny. We shall not always expect to find them supporting our view, but we shall always hope to find them strongly supporting their own freedom, and to remember that in the past, those who foolishly sought power by riding the back of the tiger ended up inside. To those people in the huts and villages of half the globe struggling to break the bonds of mass misery, we pledge our best efforts to help them help themselves for whatever period is required, not because the communists may be doing it, not because we seek their votes, but because it is right. If a free society cannot help the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich. To our sister republics south of our border, we offer a special pledge to convert our good words into good deeds, in a new alliance for progress, to assist free men and free governments in casting off the chains of poverty. But this peaceful revolution of hope cannot become the prey of hostile powers. Let all our neighbors know that we shall join with them to oppose aggression or subversion anywhere in the Americas. And let every other power know that this hemisphere intends to remain the master of its own house. To that World Assembly of Sovereign States, the United Nations, our last best hope, in an age where the instruments of war have far outpaced the instruments of peace, we renew our pledge of support to prevent it from becoming merely a forum for invective, to strengthen its shield of the new and the weak, and to enlarge the area in which its writ may run. Finally, to those nations who would make themselves our adversary, we offer not a pledge, but a request that both sides begin anew the quest for peace. Before the dark powers of destruction, unleashed by science, engulf all humanity in planned or accidental self-destruction, we dare not tempt them with weakness, for only when our arms are sufficient beyond doubt can we be certain beyond doubt that they will never be employed. But neither can two great and powerful groups of nations take comfort from our present course, both sides overburdened by the cost of modern weapons, both rightly alarmed by the steady spread of the deadly atom, yet both racing to alter that uncertain balance of terror that stays the hand of mankind's final war. So let us begin anew, remembering on both sides that civility is not a sign of weakness, and sincerity is always subject to proof. Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. Let both sides explore what problems unite us, instead of belaboring those problems which divide us. Let both sides, for the first time, formulate serious and precise proposals for the inspection and control of arms, and bring the absolute power to destroy other nations under the absolute control of all nations. Let both sides seek to invoke the wonders of science instead of its terrors. Together, let us explore the stars, conquer the desert, eradicate disease, tap the ocean depth, and encourage the arts and commerce. Let both sides unite to heed in all corners of the earth the command of Isaiah to undo the heavy burden and let the oppressed go free. And if a beachhead of cooperation may push back the jungle of suspicion, let both sides join in creating a new endeavor, not a new balance of power, but a new world of law, where the strong are just and the weak secure and the peace preserved. All this will not be finished in the first 100 days, nor will it be finished in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration, nor even perhaps in our lifetime on this planet. But let us begin. In your hands, my fellow citizens, more than mine, will rest the final success or failure of our course. Since this country was founded, each generation of Americans has been summoned to give testimony to its national loyalty. The graves of young Americans who answered the call to service surround the globe. Now the trumpet summons us again, not as a call to bear arms, though arms we need, not as a call to battle, though in battle we are, but a call to bear the burden of a long twilight struggle, year in and year out, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, a struggle against the common enemies of man, tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself. Can we forge against these enemies a grand and global alliance, North and South, East and West, that can assure a more fruitful life for all mankind. Will you join in that historic effort? In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man. Finally, whether you are citizens of America or citizens of the world, ask of us here the same high standards of strength and sacrifice which we ask of you. With a good conscience, our only sure reward, with history the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking His blessing and His help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own.
Morality, you're saying, look, I ain't got no time for that. I ain't got no time for that.
Because this media is here and designed to make sure that they ask no critical questions, to make sure that the only thing that they are concerned about is having a good time, The only thing they're concerned about is filling their bellies. The only thing they're concerned about is acquiring more and more material things. And so that is why today, one of the struggles that you have as young people, that when you want to do different events and you want to talk about real issues, you have the struggle of many of your peers who've been so conditioned in this matrix that they would rather party than listen to the truth. They would rather party and shop and go to the mall than to stand up for issues of justice. They're stuck in the matrix. But you have the responsibility of helping to wake them up,
Now, how do we know that there's a God?
After having been thoroughly brainwashed.
And how do we know that there's a creator?
Professor Dawkins, can you give an example of a genetic mutation or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
The truth is very evident. Life has such a complex design that can never come about by chance.
And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
Richard Dawkins is his name. Arguably the world's most famous atheist. I don't know how you would test for that, but maybe we'll ask him. So, right off the bat, what's wrong with, in your opinion, with believing in a God, regardless of who the God is?
I think it's false. I think that it's a matter of belief without evidence. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe.
Simple law of arithmetic, 1 + 1 = 2, never brought anything into being. I wish it did. It never has put any money into my bank account. If I put £1,000 into the bank today and later another £1,000, the laws of arithmetic will rationally explain how it is that I now have £2,000 in the bank. But if I never put any money into the bank myself and simply leave it to the laws of arithmetic to bring money into being, I shall be permanently bankrupt. C.S. Lewis, with usual brilliance, grasped this years ago. The laws of nature produce no events. They state the pattern to which every event, if only it can be induced to happen, must conform. Just as the rules of arithmetic state the pattern to which all transactions with money must conform, if only you can get a hold of any money. Thus, in one sense, the laws of nature cover the whole field of space and time. In another, what they leave out is precisely the whole real universe. The incessant torrent of actual events, which makes up true history, that must come from somewhere else. To think the laws can produce it is like thinking that you can create real money by simply doing sums. For every law says in the last resort, if you have A, then you will get B. But first catch your A. The laws will not do it for you. Now, scientists love developing theories involving mathematical laws to describe natural phenomena, which enable them to make predictions, and they've done it with spectacular success. But most are aware, I think, that on their own the theories and laws that they find cannot create anything, let alone a universe. Yet Hawking seems to think they did.
Professor Stephen Hawking says that modern science has established there was no need for God in the creation of the universe. In a new book, Hawking suggests that a theoretical framework known as M-theory can explain how the Big Bang was an inevitable consequence of the laws of physics.
According to him, it is the laws of physics, not the will of God, that provide the real explanation as to how the universe came into being. The Big Bang, he argues, was the inevitable consequence of these laws. I quote, "Because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing." Now, a supernatural being, or God, is an agent who does something. Dismissing such an agent, Hawking ascribes creative power to physical law. But physical law is not an agent. Hawking, it seems to me, is making a classical category mistake by confusing two entirely different kinds of entity, physical law and personal agency. Our physical laws are a description, usually mathematical, of what normally happens under certain given conditions. This is surely obvious from the very first example that Hawking gives in his book. The sun rises in the east. But this law does not create the sun, nor the planet Earth with east and west. It is descriptive and predictive, but not creative. Similarly, Newton's laws of gravitation doesn't create gravity or the matter in which gravity acts. In fact, it doesn't even explain gravity, as Newton himself realized. But it's even worse. The laws of physics cannot even cause anything to happen. Newton's celebrated laws of motion never caused a pool ball to race across the table. That can only be done by people using a pool cue and the action of their muscles. Suppose, to make matters clearer, we replace the universe by a jet engine, and we are asked to explain it. Shall we account for it by mentioning the personal agency of its inventor, Sir Frank Whittle? Or shall we, following Hawking, dismiss personal agency and explain the jet engine by saying it arose naturally from physical law? Now, this would be absurd. It is obvious we need both levels of explanation in order to give a complete description. It is also obvious that the scientific explanation neither conflicts nor competes with the agent explanation. They complement one another. It is the same with explanations of the universe. God does not conflict or compete with the laws of physics as an explanation. God is actually the ground of all explanation, in the sense that he is the ultimate cause in the first place of there being a world for the laws of physics to describe. Now, there's more to this, because the laws of physics can explain how the jet engine works, but not how it came to exist in the first place. The jet engine needed the intelligence and creative engineering work of Whittle. Indeed, come to think of it, the laws of physics plus Frank Whittle could not actually produce a jet engine on their own. There also needed to be some material subject to those laws that could be worked on by Whittle. Matter, ladies and gentlemen, may be humble stuff, but it is not produced by laws. I submit to you that the world of strict naturalism, in which clever mathematical laws all by themselves bring the universe and life into existence, is pure science fiction. Pure science fiction. Pure science fiction. Now, Hawking here echoes Peter Atkins, a colleague at Oxford, a well-known atheist who believes that space-time generates its own dust in the process of its own self-assembly. Atkins dubs this the cosmic bootstrap principle, referring to the self-contradictory idea of a person lifting himself by pulling on his own bootlaces. Philosopher of religion Keith Ward is surely right to say that Atkins' view of the universe is as blatantly self-contradictory as the name he gives to it, pointing out that it is logically impossible for a cause to bring about some effect without already being in existence. Ward concludes, between the hypothesis of God and the hypothesis of a cosmic bootstrap, there's no competition. There's no competition. There's no competition. We were always right to think that persons or universes who seek to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps are forever doomed to failure. What perhaps all this goes to show is that nonsense remains nonsense even when talked by world-famous scientists.
So the only alternative is an embodied mind, what theists call God. An embodied mind, immaterial, outside time and space.
So there's a God. Then you have to say, but sorry, where did God come from? It's not a question I hear often answered.
In order to recognize that an explanation is the best, you don't have to have an explanation of the explanation. In order to recognize that an explanation is the best, you don't have to be able to explain the explanation. Folks, this is an elementary point in the philosophy of science. Suppose astronauts were to find on the backside of the moon a pile of machinery there that had not been left by American or Russian cosmonauts. What would be the best explanation for that machinery? Well, clearly it would be some sort of extraterrestrial intelligence that had left the machinery there. And you don't have to have an explanation of who these extraterrestrials were or came from or how they got there or anything of that sort in order to recognize that the best explanation of this machinery is intelligent design. In order to recognize an explanation as the best, you don't have to have an explanation of the explanation. In fact, when you think about it, requiring that would immediately lead to an infinite regress of explanations. You would need an explanation of the explanation, But in order to recognize that as best, you need an explanation of the explanation of the explanation, and then an explanation of the explanation of the explanation of the explanation, and so that nothing could ever be explained.
One of the outdated philosophical cliches, in my opinion, is that, well, who created God? We hear that all the time, and they think it's a baseball bat against the theists. But it's made of sponge. And let me tell you why. If we say, what caused the cause that caused the universe, then let's continue. What caused the cause that caused the cause that caused the universe? Let's continue. Then what caused the cause that caused the cause that caused the cause that caused the universe? Let's carry on. Then what caused the cause that caused the cause that caused the cause that caused?
And that goes on and on and on backwards. But at one point, I have to have an uncaused cause, or there would be nothing in existence today. Think of a string of dominoes. You have a domino that knocks over a domino that knocks over a domino. I have to have a first domino, or that string of falling could never start.
So in essence, to claim who created God or what caused the cause of the universe is equivalent of saying that we don't have a universe, that we don't have a universe.
Remember the premises of the argument I gave. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Something cannot come into being out of nothing. But if something is eternal and timeless, then it doesn't fall under that first premise. It doesn't need a cause. And the concept of God is the concept of an eternal, self-existent, necessary being, and therefore the answer is simply that God is uncaused. He is self-existent.
Dear Dr. Craig, one of the objections which has been raised is the first law of thermodynamics, the rule that matter and energy can only be rearranged, or in other words, that matter is neither being created nor destroyed.
Yeah. What's funny about this objection is that this is not an objection to the existence of God. This would be an objection to the Big Bang theory of the origin of the universe. It would show that the Big Bang theory of the origin of the universe is false, because according to that theory, all matter and energy, even space and time themselves, came into being at the moment of the Big Bang and are therefore not eternal. They haven't always been there in the past. So if these fellows were right, all contemporary cosmologists who believe in the Big Bang theory of the origin of the universe would be contradicting the laws of thermodynamics, and that's hardly the case. Why? Well, because the laws of thermodynamics, in particular the law of the conservation of matter and energy, only applies once the universe comes into being. It applies at every moment, at every time, and every point in the universe. But it doesn't apply to the origin of the universe itself. And that's why cosmologists don't consider that the law of conservation of energy and mass is violated by the Big Bang theory of the origin of the universe. In fact, the atheist fellow mentioned the laws of thermodynamics. He might have wanted to talk about the second law of thermodynamics, which says that in a closed system, things tend toward increasing disorder. Now, the universe on the atheistic view is just a gigantic closed system, because it is everything there is, and there's nothing outside it. And what that implies is that given sufficient time, everything in the universe would grind down to a state of maximum disorder. So if the universe has existed for infinite time from eternity past, why is it that we don't find ourselves in this sort of thermodynamically disordered state? I think that the best answer to that is that the universe has not existed forever. It began a finite time ago in a low entropy condition, and the thermodynamic clock has been running ever since then. So the evidence of thermodynamics itself suggests that the universe and matter and energy are not infinite or eternal in the past, but had an absolute beginning.
To remind ourselves of the argument again, we have premise 1, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Premise 2, the universe began to exist. And from that, we draw the conclusion that the universe had a cause. The universe had a cause. The universe had a cause.
So we ask another question, what is the nature of this cause? And the nature of this cause, upon conceptual analysis, which means critical thinking about this cause, we come to some startling conclusions. This cause must be one. The reason for this is because if we use the philosophical principle Occam's razor, which posits that we do not multiply entities beyond necessity, then we conclude it must be one. This cause must be uncaused, as we have already discussed the absurdity of an infinite regress of events, similarly with causes. This cause must be immaterial because it created the sum of all matter, which is the universe itself. Significantly, brothers, sisters and friends, this cause must be personal. The reason I'm saying this is how else can an eternal cause bring into an existence a finite effect, the universe that had a beginning in time? It must have chosen the universe to come into existence, and choice indicates a will, and a will indicates a personality. So, we have concluded the traditional view on God, that a transcendental, immaterial, uncaused, eternal being exists. Being exists. Being exists.
You can, with equal facility, model on a Neanderthaloid skull the features of a chimpanzee or the lineaments of a philosopher. These alleged restorations of ancient types of man have very little, if any, scientific value and are likely only to mislead the public. Evolutionists go so far in this subject that they can even invent very different faces for the same skull. The three entirely different reconstructions made for the fossil called Zinjanthropus is a famous example showing how persistent evolutionists are in producing these false masks. Evolutionists engage not only in drawing and modeling tricks, sometimes they commit deliberate forgeries. The most famous of these frauds is the Piltdown fossil, introduced in England in 1912 by an evolutionist named Charles Dawson. This fossil was presented as the most important transitional form between ape and man and was displayed in museums for more than 30 years. Experts who re-examined the fossil in 1949 discovered that it was a forgery that had been produced by attaching an orangutan's jaw to a human skull. Another intermediate transitional form fabricated by evolutionists was the Nebraska man. This was cooked up in 1922 on the basis of a single fossil tooth. The evolutionists did not neglect to give it an ostentatious Latin name, Asparapithecus harold-cooki, or to make imaginary drawings related to it. It was soon revealed that the tooth that had been the source of inspiration for Nebraska Man, in fact, belonged to a wild pig. Many other fossil skulls have been presented as great evidence for evolution failed one by one. Neanderthal man was advanced as evidence in 1856, dismissed in 1960. Piltdown man was advanced as evidence in 1912, dismissed in 1953. Zinjanthropus was advanced as evidence in 1959, dismissed in 1960. Ramapithecus was advanced as evidence in 1964, dismissed in 1979. Despite all these facts, these skulls are still presented to the public through the media and in some evolutionist textbooks as if they were scientific facts. In many countries, an important part of the society supposes that evolution is a proven fact. A great deal of this so-called evidence of evolution, much of which has been dismissed by evolutionists themselves, is still presented to school children in their textbooks, where they are depicted as the ancestors of man. In fact, the truth that the evolutionists try so hard to deny and conceal is there for all to see. Species appeared all of a sudden and perfectly on the earth. That is, they were created. The divine creator, ruling over the whole of nature, created all kinds with their unique and perfect traits. He is the Lord of the heavens, the earth, and all that is between them.
الهاشمي قال حن القلب حان، الهاشمي قال حن القلب حان، وانا حنيني مع قلبي حنين، وانا حنيني مع قلبي حنين. الهاشمي قال حن قلبي حن، الهاشمي قال حن قلبي حن، وانا حنيني مع قلبه حنين، وانا حنيني مع قلبه حنين. صدفت قمري على وادي تبن، صدفت قمري على وادي تبن، وبقى يحرر من يساري واليمين، وبقى يحرر من يساري واليمين. يرطن علي ونعرف ما رطن، يرطن علي ونعرف ما رطن، كل كلام حالي تكلم كلمتين، كلام حالي تكلم كلمتين. والله ما فارقة طول زمننا، والله ما فارقة طول زمن، ما ينتسي طول عمري والسنين، ما ينتسي طول عمري والسنين. نسيت فرضي من جماله والسنن، نسيت فرضي من جماله والسنن، منه يشيب الطفل اللي عاد جنين، منه يشيب الطفل اللي عاد جنين. نسعج عيده على امتان سنن،